Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast. Today, I'm doing a bonus episode. Why? Well, in part because I just came back from Europe. I went to see the Minnesota Vikings play in London, believe it or not. And so I haven't recorded anything in some time. I have a little bit of a cold, but I got an itch to talk about something. And I thought I'd just release it as a bonus episode. And what is it that I want to talk to you about? Well, I am sitting on the plane thinking to myself about this strategy that I talk about. You hear me talk about even on these commercials, and it's called wealth formula banking. And I was thinking to myself about the fact that, we have a bunch of new listeners. And when I was in your position and hearing about concepts like wealth formula banking initially, I didn't get them and it never really made any sense. My own story basically is that I was listening to a podcast. I kept hearing about people saying, be your own bank, be your own bank. And I was like, what? I don't even understand what that means. I mean, like, it does not tell me anything about what this concept is. So of course, if nothing sounds exciting about be your own bank, then you're just going to pass on. So I never really listened to it, but I heard that so many times that it was in my head. I just didn't know what it meant. So anyway, I was at one of these, one of these investor meetings, alternative investor guys and stuff like that. And someone brought up this whole concept again. And I said, what exactly is that? What's the big deal? I don't get it. Be your own bank. And that's when I had my aha moment when somebody explained it to me. And hopefully that's what I can do for you right now. Okay. So normally, say you want to invest in some sort of cash flowing asset. I don't care what it is. It could be real estate. It could even be some sort of dividend producing ETF. There's all sorts of stuff out there where you can, look for cash flow right now. So normally when you see that cash flowing asset, basically you're going to take money out of your checking or savings account and then make your investment. Voila, there you go. Right now, it's not a problem, but here's the issue. When you're accumulating that money, like you're saving up for that investment, right? It's not making anything, right? This checking account, savings account, you're getting way under 1%. It's not going to yield anything. And meanwhile, inflation in our dreams right now is running at 2 or 3%, right? So what does that mean? Money in the bank growing at less than 1%, and inflation running at 2 to 3%. That means there is a guarantee that you lose buying power, effectively losing money by keeping money and accumulating it in a savings account. And that's why my friend, the controversial Robert Kiyosaki, always says savers are losers. That's what he means. He's talking about the debasement of currency as a function of how much interest you get, right? That's what he means by that. Now, so where does this whole wealth formula banking thing come in? Well, essentially, you're creating a special kind of cash value life insurance policy. Now, this is special. This is not, the stuff that the people say is a terrible one, but this is stuff where the super high net worth world is in, right? Where they can engineer products to work for them. And that's where this comes from, right? Now, when you have this kind of overfunded cash value life insurance policy, you basically have a cash account that becomes essentially your savings account. And that grows not at less than 1%, but at a virtually bulletproof 5 to 6% compounding rate per year. Now, 5 to 6% is great. It's not that sexy, though, I know. But here is the kicker. Here is the aha, that moment that I had. Now, when you make that investment, you don't have to pull that money out of your insurance account and put it into your deal. What you do is you borrow against the insurance company's general ledger at a simple interest rate. Okay, so let me say that again. Your money continues to grow in an account at 5 to 6% compounding interest rate, and then you borrow at an interest rate that's less than that. And it's not only less, but it's also simple interest, not compounding interest. For those of you who know the difference between compounding and simple interest, you know what that means. It's an enormous difference. So your original money keeps compounding inside policy at 5 to 6%, even while you borrowed against it to invest in cash flowing assets like real estate. That's the key. Now, how's that different from a HELOC? So with a home equity line of credit, when you borrow money, your money stops working for you right away, right? There's no money there anymore. With wealth formula banking, your money never stops growing. So now you've got the same dollars doing two jobs at one time, earning safe compounding growth inside your policy and generating income from your investment outside of it. And all you did here, all you did is have an account, essentially, create a wealth formula banking account. And you simply, instead of going from a savings account to the investment, you're going from a wealth formula banking account to your investment. And that simple difference makes it so that you are completely supercharging your returns. And of course, we didn't even talk about the fact that the money that's growing inside of the insurance cash account is tax-free. There's asset protection there. And oh, yeah, it happens to be life insurance. So there's also a death benefit. Listen, this is an extraordinary tool. It's not magic, it's math. And it's the kind of smart arbitrage that can turn ordinary investments into extraordinary ones. And you ought to know about it because a lot of people know about it. They're using it. In fact, I can tell you right now, we have a lot of people using this kind of thing in our community. There's not a single person I know who has regretted doing something like this. So anyway, I am now going to play essentially an in-depth explanation of this for you that I created. And it's at a webinar on wealthformulabanking.com. And if it's of interest to you, of course, make sure to sign up for a consultation. It's free. And you talk with me and you talk with probably Brandon and, learn about it. Because I actually think this is something that, a lot of people, if they actually understood it, they would realize it's such a no-brainer and they would do it. So anyway, we'll have that detailed explanation right after this.
Hey, everybody, this is Buck Joffrey, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a concept that I call wealth formula banking. And the concept is pretty remarkable to me because essentially the thing that you're going to want to take away from this is it allows you to invest your money in two places at once. In other words, you invest one lump sum and it's growing at two places at the same time. And that's what I think is really remarkable about this. So in this video, what you're going to see is that wealth formula banking amplifies your profits. It creates tax advantage growth, preserves liquidity in a tax beneficial way. It protects your capital, and it's a very great asset protection tool. And it creates value in multiple places, again, with the same dollars. Okay, so let's start with a simple concept, the opportunity fund. What do I mean by the opportunity fund? I mean the fund, where you keep your funds when you're about to invest in something. So that's, for most people, that's probably a checking account, right? In other words, you accumulate some money, you got 100 grand and you allocate it somewhere to some sort of investment. That is what I mean by an opportunity fund. So what's the problem with most opportunity funds? Well, they don't grow, right? A checking account doesn't grow, nor does a savings account. Now, a money market might grow a little bit, but a money market may not be particularly liquid, right? Now, you might also say, well, I'm just going to keep my money in some stocks until I'm ready to, invest in some real estate deal. But that might go up and down. And by the time that good opportunity comes along, you may not have that 100 grand anymore. So safety becomes an issue. So what we're trying to focus on here is the two problems that people have typically, which is liquidity and safety. Most people, again, are using these savings account, checking account, or money markets for opportunity funds. And what I'm suggesting is that instead of doing that, you might consider a wealth formula banking policy. Now, the technical term for wealth formula banking policy is maximum overfunded dividend paying whole life insurance. And it's designed in a way that is tax advantage for growth. It's safe and predictable. It's liquid. There's a death benefit. And most importantly, for what we're talking about, there is a loan provision. So how does this strategy work? Okay, wealth formula banking is going to become that opportunity fund that we talked about. Now, why? Because inside of a wealth formula banking account, your money grows in two ways. There's a guaranteed interest rate that's actually paid out by the insurance company, say, for example, Penn Mutual, and there's also a dividend that's paid. Now, that's technically not guaranteed, but as you'll see, it is pretty much guaranteed because for a company like Penn Mutual that's paying out for 170 years in a row through the Great Depression and through hyperinflation of the 80s, it's a pretty safe bet that there's going to be a dividend. I'll also point out, this is going to become very important shortly, is that this money in this opportunity fund is going to grow at compounding interest. Compounding interest rate. Remember magic of compounding interest? We're going to get into that a lot in a minute here, but that's very, very important. Now, the strategy itself, how does it work? Okay, basically, again, you've got this opportunity fund, which is now going to be wealth formula banking. So instead of using that checking account or that money market account, you have got this money in wealth formula banking where it is growing at a compounding interest rate, right? Now, you are going to borrow money from that wealth formula banking account of yours and buy some kind of rental property or invest in some sort of cash flowing opportunity, whether that's real estate or anything else. When I say that you're borrowing from your wealth formula banking policy, you're kind of not actually taking out your own money. You see, what you're doing is you are using the money that's growing in your wealth formula banking account as collateral to borrow from the insurance company at a simple interest rate. Now, that's really, really important. Your money's growing at a compounding interest rate. You're borrowing at a simple interest rate. So now you borrow and you buy that rental house, whatever your cash flowing asset is, a syndication, who knows. And then you are taking those monthly cash flows, and instead of putting them in a checking account, you're just going to put it right back in your wealth formula banking account that's going to grow at, again, 5 to 6% compounding interest instead of 0.1 or 2 in a checking account. Now, when you do this, you can see that entire bucket, the wealth formula banking opportunity fund, is getting bigger, right? And so what you do is you rinse and repeat. You take money out of it again. You borrow at a simple interest rate from this fund that's growing at a compounding interest rate. You're borrowing at a simple interest rate, putting it back into the next property, and boom, cash flow goes back into wealth formula banking. When you sell that house, that money goes back into wealth formula banking, and you've got this, tremendous cycle of growth fueled by the fact that you're making money not only from the asset, but from the wealth formula banking account as well. You're making money in two places at the same time. So again, let's talk a little bit about what those benefits were of this kind of strategy again. Well, one is that growth that I talked about, that compounding interest, is tax advantage growth. In other words, it's inside the policy. It's not taxed by the IRS. That's huge. Okay. Now, the other thing is, again, we are creating value in multiple places at once. Like I said, you have a policy, the wealth formula banking policy, that's growing at compounding interest. Okay. Compounding interest. And you're borrowing from the insurance company's general ledger at a simple interest rate. So unlike a HELOC, like a home equity line of credit, when you borrow that money, you're pulling it out, right? You're pulling it out. You're not making money on that money anymore. Whereas with wealth formula banking, you continue to make money even though you've borrowed it, right? Because you actually haven't borrowed from your own account. You're borrowing from the insurance company at a simple interest rate. So growing at 5 to 6% compounding interest rate, borrowing at a simple interest rate. That is huge. That's what allows you to create money value in multiple places at once. And again, that's because of this arbitrage, compound versus simple interest. Now let's get into that a little bit more because it's terrifically important. Okay. Your money is growing at compound interest. Look up compound interest, magic of compounding interest. Okay. It's really important because you can see those blocks get bigger and bigger and bigger, but not in a linear fashion. They grow exponentially. And that's how your money is growing inside a wealth formula banking account. But when you borrow, you're borrowing at a linear, simple interest rate. Okay. Try to process that for a second, because here's the thing. Let's say, for example, your money was growing at 6% compounding interest, and you borrowed that money at a 6% simple interest. You would still come out way ahead, because the arbitrage between the compound concept and the simple interest concept, it's actually huge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the difference between simply using money from your checking account or creating a wealth formula banking account and then just using that as your opportunity fund. Okay. So here are the assumptions. Again, you're going to use a wealth formula banking policy. You're going to take a policy loan at year 2 for $100,000 with a simple interest rate at 5%. Now, your annual loan interest paid you're going to pay that. You're not going to let that compound. And the way you're going to pay that is, well, you're going to get cash on cash. You're going to get a return on your investment. Instead of putting that in your checking account, you're going to just put that back into your wealth formula banking account. And we're going to assume that that policy, that wealth formula banking policy, is compounding at 5.75% annually. Okay, these are very reasonable and realistic assumptions that I'm using. Of course, they're going to be different at different times, but it's good for illustration purposes. Okay, now let's talk about the real estate syndication. Now, this is a very common scenario that you see on a pro forma that shows that you're going to put in, say, $100,000. You are going to cash flow 6% per year. In other words, 6% cash on cash. And then at year 5, you're going to sell the asset. And when you do, the total return, meaning the total cash flow plus the capital gains, is going to provide you with 100% return in 5 years. So that's a 20% annualized return. Again, that's a very, very common pro forma in the world of value add real estate. So let's look at what happens. Okay. So if you just use money from your checking account, you're not getting any boost there. You're not getting the amplification. You made your $30,000 from that $6,000 a year for 5 years, and you made that $70,000 in capital gains, and you came out with a $100,000 profit. Okay. Now, by simply using that arbitrage of that 5.75 compounding interest and 5% simple interest that you borrowed at, if you use wealth formula banking, you're going to add $7,236 to your total profit. Again, that's all you did. Instead of using one account, you use another account, and boom, your total delta, your percentage delta there is 7.2% in favor of policy over 5 years. You've got an increase of 7.2% in return simply by using a wealth formula banking policy prior to investing, right? You took one extra step and resulted in 7.2% more profit. Now, imagine if you were doing that across the board on all of your investments. Just imagine what that could do. Another example here, in many times in the real estate space, you will see fixed income type opportunities as well. You see, preferred equity, that type of thing. There's a lot of that going on right now. So let's use some assumptions here on this second type of opportunity, which is using a wealth formula banking policy. Again, we're going to use a policy loan of $100,000 like before, with a simple interest of 5%. Again, we're going to pay back that loan with the proceeds of this particular opportunity. So in other words, instead of putting the profits in your checking account, you're going to put it back in your wealth formula banking account. So that's one of the assumptions. And then that the wealth formula banking policy compounds at 5.75% annually. Okay. So in this syndication, let's say this is, again, fixed, a sort of fixed distribution type thing where they're going to give you 10% cash on cash for 10 years. And at the end of that 10 years, you're going to get a return of the initial capital, and you obviously get to keep all the profits. Math is pretty easy. If you're using a checking account, you made 10% per year for 10 years, and boom, you got $100,000 more than you started with, right? So that's great. But if all you did was, instead of using that checking account, you used a wealth formula banking account, you just added almost 25% to your total return. $224,900.90. Again, that may not seem like a huge difference, but imagine that's affecting all of your investments now. You just got, an extra 25% essentially for free. This slide is basically saying the same thing, right? $24,900.90 when using a wealth formula banking strategy, 24.9% higher net gain for the policy strategy compared to the checking account strategy. And the thing is, this could be amplified further by additional future investments. In other words, what do I mean by that? This opportunity fund's growing a lot faster than it normally would if it was a checking account, because it's growing again at that, exponential compounding rate of 5 to 6%. It's going to give you opportunities to make other investments, right? So that's compounding in another way. You're compounding by creating other investments from the money you're making. Okay, so you've done this for 20 years, 30 years, and you've created this huge wealth formula banking, opportunity fund. And you decide, I'm kind of done with this. I don't really want to buy any more rental properties. I don't really want to do any more syndications. Done well. I just want to live off this money now. So how do you do that? Well, after years of accumulating money from these investments, you can access money from your policies tax-free as retirement income. Why is that? How is that possible? Good question. It's because when we take that income, we're essentially just taking loans from our opportunity fund. Loans are not taxable. And that's where this retirement income comes from. Now, of course, that doesn't sound necessarily appetizing the way I have to take a bunch of loans from my policy to live on. But understand that you don't need to pay those loans back. That is essentially, it's just income. How does the loan get paid back? Well, for one thing, your policy's gotten big enough where you're continuously growing at a compounding interest rate. So your policy could theoretically be growing at faster than the amount of money that you're actually taking out. But the other thing is, the way those loans get paid back is that eventually, unfortunately, everybody dies. And when you die, all the loans are paid back with the death benefit. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is also a life insurance policy. And so there is a death benefit that is typically going to be significantly bigger than the actual cash value. And that's going to pay off the debt, off the loans. And guess what? The remaining money from that death benefit after your loans are paid off, go to your family. So let's talk again a little bit about these benefits of this strategy. So you've got this arbitrage, simple versus compounding, giving you positive cash flow. You've got compounding. Essentially, you're continuing to earn money in two places at once with a single investment. I didn't mention that there's also this opportunity for tax deduction. Where? Well, as you recall, you're taking loans from your policy to make investments. Now, ask your CPA about this, but in many cases, CPAs will tell you that if you do that, the interest that you're paying when you borrow is actually deductible. So in effect, that is actually juicing your returns even more. And finally, there's this long-term permanent death benefit for the ones you love. Now, I got to ask you, why wouldn't you do this? And I'm asking you that because when I finally figured out what this whole thing was about, that's what I asked myself. So the key takeaways: what does wealth formula banking do? It adds a layer of profitability for investors. It creates tax advantage growth, safe and predictable. You've got asset protection. And finally, you've got this distribution phase where you got, tax-free income, tax-favored withdrawals. Now, I know this can sound kind of confusing and overwhelming, but I think the best way to learn more about it is by simply contacting us and getting a free consultation with one of our advisors. Again, it's wealthformulabanking.com. Go there and simply fill out a form, and we'll be in touch as soon as possible. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll get a chance to talk about it more in detail at another time.